D. More Docs present the complete story of Dragon Tales, Dragon Tales.
And he wished on a dragon scale, and that's what started Dragon Tales. Around the room the dragons flew, but Emmy and Max knew what to do. They climbed on the backs of their dragon friends. Now the adventures never end. Dragon Tales, it's almost time for Dragon Tales. Come along, take my hand, let's all go to Dragonland.
The wish that started it all. Absolute silence. Then the distinct chime of a music box opening, followed by a soft glittering shimmer effect and the gentle rustle of a paper-wrapped box being untied. A child's voice whispers an exciting wish, and then the wind chimes softly in the background. For a moment, do not think about today. Think about the last time a simple rhyme or a tiny object can completely alter reality. When an ordinary addict or dusty toy chest felt like a gateway to an infinite universe. Whether you realize it or not, you grew up during an era of public broadcasting that treated children's imagination not as something to manage, but as a superpower, because it is. Shows were not just trying to keep you quiet for half an hour, they were inviting you on a journey. Some taught you how to read, some built your social skills, and one colorful scale-covered corner of PBS taught millions of children something entirely unique. How to face big fears, how to handle frustrations, and how to fly when you feel completely grounded. Funny thing is, Dragon Tales never looked like a high-stakes adventure epic. There were no villains trying to conquer the world, no dark threats lurking around every corner. Most days, the biggest crisis in Dragonland was Lost Dragon Scale. A clumsy landing on a school in the sky playground, or learning how to share a magical snack with a two-headed dragon, and somehow that was enough. More than enough, actually. Because while much of television kept asking, how do we keep children entertained? Dragon Tales quietly answered something different. What do you do when you're scared of trying? And decades later, we are still humming that theme song. Not because it's the loudest, but because it spoke softly enough for millions of children to remember what it felt like to wish upon a dragon scale. Come here. You gotta hear this. Because there is more to the story. You dig? Now, why the world needed Dragonland? Before Emmy and Max ever found that little dragon scale, before Ord learned how to conquer his fear of the dark, before Zack and Wheezy started bickering, there was another story unfolding. The story of childhood growing pains. Because every generation of kids faces the same quiet, overwhelming hurdles. Moving to a new neighborhood, feeling too small for the big kids' playground, struggling to tie your shoes, or feeling paralyzed when you make a mistake. In the late 1990s, children's television was shifting. The landscape was filling up with loud animation styles and fast-paced commercial formatting. But public television, anchored by Children's Television Workshop, retained a different compass. They understood that preschool and early elementary years are a delicate balancing act between boundless wonder and absolute vulnerability. Children do not just need colors and motion, they need emotional scaffolding. They need to see characters who fail, who get frustrated, who stumble over their words, and who learn that mistakes are just stepping stones to getting right. or to getting it right, I should say. That philosophy created a bedrock for a brand new fantasy world, but before the school in the sky, before Quetzal's wise guidance, and before millions of kids learned how to wish themselves across dimensions, there were creators looking at the universal anxieties of growing up and asking how to turn those fears into an adventure. And like so many extraordinary journeys, it begins with an ordinary artist and canvas. More reflection. Magic doesn't change your problems. It just gives you the courage to face them. So remember that. Every animated series starts as an image in someone's head. For Dragon Tales, that image came from Ron Rodecker. Excuse me, I don't say it wrong. A retired educator and artist who began sketching whimsical, friendly dragons during a period of personal recovery. These dragons were not originally conceived as television characters. Rodecker began drawing them while recovering from coronary bypass surgery, using their enormous bodies and gentle personalities to represent the force of life that can feel too large to control. Years later, producer Jim Cohen encountered the drawings and recognized that their emotional contradiction, powerful creatures carrying vulnerable feelings, could become the foundation of a children's series. Rodecker wasn't trying to draw terrifying mythical beasts from medieval legends. He wanted dragons that looked approachable, huggable, and deeply expressive. Creatures with big eyes, bright colors, and bright, distinct personalities that children could instantly recognize as friends rather than monsters. The core premise was deceptively simple. Two young siblings, 6-year-old Emmy and her 4-year-old younger brother Max, move into a new house. While exploring their new home, they discover a glittering, mysterious dragon scale tucked away in a box, reciting the familiar dragon scale rhyme. I wish with all my heart to fly with dragons in the land apart. The ordinary world dissolved, and they find themselves transported to a vibrant, rolling realm where toys come alive, music fills the air, and dragons go to school. It was an ingenious wish fulfillment fantasy designed with a deliberate emotional purpose. Dragonland was never just an escape from reality. It was a safe psychological space where children could practice the emotional resilience they needed back in the real world. Now, the show that almost never reached PBS. Transforming Rodecker's artwork into a national television series required more than a compelling collection of characters. Jim Cohen and the developer team had to turn a visual concept into a complete educational world, one capable of supporting stories, songs, recurring characters, and clearly defined developmental goals. Developed in partnership with Children's Television Workshop, Columbia, TriStar Television, and Adelaide Productions, the series relied on an international network of animation studios to bring Rodecker's drawing to life, with key creative contributions from developers and writers like Wesley Ear, Jeffrey Scott, Cliff Ruby, and Ilana Lesser. The project established an emotional framework rooted in early childhood psychology. The writing team built an ensemble in which every character represented a recognizable part of early childhood. Max carried the unrestrained enthusiasm of a 4-year-old who wanted to attempt everything immediately. Emmy was the more thoughtful older sister, although she still had to learn that leadership did not mean always being right or looking enormous, but carried some of the smallest and most familiar fears. Cassie was cautious, bookish, and deliberate. Zach and Wheezy turned sibling disagreement into unforgettable physical metaphor, two personalities sharing the same body. And Quetzal, the patient teacher at the school in the sky, offered gentle guidance while naturally incorporating Spanish into the life of Dragonland. Between the vibrant animation and the gentle lessons stood an entire production pipeline working to ensure that millions of children watching across North America felt seen, understood, and supported. Now, a more reflection. Education works best when it doesn't feel like a lesson, but a safe place to make mistakes. You did? Now, bringing Dragonland to life. The animation shifts and the visual identity, the ambient hum of an animation studio light table, fans whirling and pencils flipping rapidly. Bringing Dragonland to the screen required an evolving technical approach across the production run. For its landmark first season, which premiered on September 6, 1999, the series utilized traditional cell animation, giving the characters a rich, hand-painted texture that brought warmth to every forest, cloud, and castle. As television production technology transitioned into the early 2000s, subsequent seasons shifted to digital ink and paint, maintaining the bright, saturated visual palette that defined the show's signature aesthetic. Behind the animation was an international production effort coordinating storyboards, layouts, voice performances, music, and final picture. Yet the true heartbeat of the show was never just the visuals. It was the music. Now let's jump into the music of Dragonland and the theme. A gentle original acoustic progression begins, warm, bright, and breezy, featuring flute melodies and soft percussions, audio cables plugging in, and acoustic guitar strings strumming clear, and choir voices rising softly into a microphone. And then the sound that launched 1,000 childhood memories fell into place. The creative team needed a theme song that felt like an invitation rather than a commercial jingle. Created by a musical team that included, Mary Wood, Jesse Harris, and Joey Levine, and carried by Wood's unmistakably warm vocals. Themes like you just couldn't escape its rhythm, felt playful enough to make children move, but gentle enough to promise that wherever they were going, they would be safe there. Music taught kids how to calm down when they were angry, how to cheer up a friend, and how to believe in themselves when a puzzle seemed too hard. Now, on September 6, 1999, television screens across North America lit up. Years of planning, sketching, and emotional design had finally built a permanent home in the clouds. I think it's time for another more reflection. A great theme song doesn't just welcome you to a show, it welcomes you back to a feeling of safety. Now, growing up in Dragonland, expanding the circle and inclusion. A school playground bell rings out, children chattering, playground bells bouncing, and playground balls bouncing, and the gentle clatter of a schoolyard gate opening. Yeah, that sounds like a good scene to me. Okay. As the series progressed into its second and third seasons, the creative team expanded the world of Dragonland to reflect an even wider spectrum of childhood experiences. They introduced new characters like Lorca, a dragonborn without wings who traveled using a wheeled mobility device. Expanding the show's understanding of access and participation, his stories did not treat him as helpless or inspirational simply for existing. He joined the adventure, solved problems, and contributed to the group like every other child in Dragonland. Later seasons also welcomed Enrique, a new human friend who brought a fresh dynamic to the group, showcasing the natural adjustments of welcoming newcomers into an established circle of friends. The writers consistently tackled scenarios that mirrored real elementary school life, whether it was learning how to be good at sports when you lose a game, figuring out how to compromise when two friends want completely different things, or overcoming the fear of public speaking. Dragonland was a laboratory for emotional intelligence. The show never talked down to its audience. If Max threw a tantrum because he couldn't get his way, the narrative didn't instantly reward him. It gave him space to recognize his mistake, calm down, and make it right. Simple as that. Now, lessons without lectures. Footsteps echoing down an elementary school hallway while a teacher steps out for a quiet moment. How do you teach emotional regulation without sounding like a textbook? Dragon Tales succeeded by teaching children's emotional struggles with absolute seriousness. When Ord became afraid, his friends rarely dismissed him or forced him forward. They helped him break the frightening situation into something smaller and manageable. When Zack and Wheezy faced friction and resolution required them to communicate, compromise, and synchronize their movements. The fantasy elements, flying bikes, wishing scales, cloud whales, and musical instruments were always metaphors for internal growth. The dragons weren't just magical creatures, they were externalized feelings. Ord was big feelings, Cassie was careful anxiety, Zack and Wheezy were sibling friction, and Max and Emmy were the restless curiosity of childhood itself. Now, a more reflection. True empathy means teaching kids that their fears are real, but their capacity to face them is so much bigger. Now, a cultural landmark, syndication, legacy, and internet era. Soft mouse click, computer startup tone, keyboards tap, and the faint sweeps of digital interface mix softly beneath the distant sound of wind chimes. Across 3 seasons, Dragon Tales produced 78 original half-hour episodes containing 155 individual stories. Because later broadcasts repackaged and repeated earlier segments, the complete television listing is commonly continued as 94 episodes. For years afterwards, reruns kept Dragonland on PBS Kids. As the generation that grew up watching the series entered adulthood, Dragon Tales took on a new life online. Its theme song and familiar imagery continued circulating through nostalgic compilations, reaction posts, and childhood memory discussions. For many viewers, Dragonland became shorthand for gentler atmosphere of turn on millennial PBS Kids. The show proved that children's television doesn't need to age into cynicism to remain relevant. Its gentle idealism became a digital sanctuary for adults seeking refuge from a loud, complicated world. Now for a more reflection. Nostalgia isn't just missing the past, it's remembering the exact moments you felt safe enough to dream. You know what I'm saying? That's why we miss nostalgia. That's why nostalgia is so important. The last flight home, the final seasons and saying goodbye, quiet room tones, the gentle original acoustic progression returns softly on an acoustic guitar, playing a slow, reflective variation before fading out. By the mid-2000s, children's media was changing rapidly. On April 11, 2005, the final news story aired. Paired with a repeat from an earlier season, there was no ceremonial final flight, no last wish, no moment when Emmy and Max placed the dragon scale back inside the box and said goodbye. Dragonland did not close. It simply stopped sending back new adventures. There was no moment when childhood officially ended because childhood rarely gave us one. One day, without recognizing it, we simply stopped making a wish. Now, the final circle. The gentle chime of a music box closing, a soft breeze rustling through leaves, and a pencil scratching across a blank page. When you were a child, you do not call it imagination, you call it what happened. The box became a ship. The backyard became another country. The stone in your hand carried powers no adult could see. Only later were you taught to divide the world into what was real and what was pretend. But Dragon Tales understood that pretend was never the opposite of real. The dragons may have been imaginary, but the courage children practiced beside them was not. The fears were real, the frustration was real, the friendships were real, and every time they tried again, the flight was real too. Can I ask you something? When was the last time you thought about your childhood imagination? Not the toys, but the feeling. The absolute certainty that if you wished hard enough, the world could open up and show you something wondrous. Dragon Tales was never really about dragons, flying schools, or magical lands. Those were simply the shapes the story underneath was always human, about growing, learning how to be brave when your knees are shaking, holding on to your friends, and discovering that courage is something you practice every single day. Most stories tell children that courage means no longer being afraid. Dragon Tales offered something gentler. You don't have to stop being afraid before you begin to fly. A distant music box chimes ring out once more, followed by a soft breeze fading slowly into absolute quiet room tone. I am D. Moore, and remember, there is more to the story.